Welcome to the Transport Leaders Podcast, where we discuss the breakthrough ideas and bold solutions transforming the future of transport around the world. Join a global community of transport leaders, professionals, academics, and advocates as we unpack transport's toughest challenges and spotlight the strategies driving real change. From system reform levers and political realities to sustainability and technological disruption, experienced transport professionals Graham McCabe and Russell King and their guests offer expert perspectives as we discuss ways to transform our transport systems.
G'day, I'm Graham McCabe. I'm the founder of Step Advisory, a transport planning and traffic engineering firm, and I've worked in consultancy and government for over 25 years across Australia and Australasia.
Hello, I'm Russell King. I'm a transport strategist and founder of the Transport Leader blog and newsletter, and have worked on the policy side of transport for around 20 years.
Russell, what are we going to talk about today?
Oh, have we got a treat for you today, Graham? It's commuter parking.
And in what sense are we talking about commuter parking?
What is it? Why do we do it? How much do we need? Should it be free? Is it a good solution? Does it help with mode shift? All of the above, really. Let's see how we go.
Excellent. Okay, so commuter parking. So what we're talking about here is parking for people who are traveling primarily into CBD areas who would otherwise drive and are being encouraged to use public transport. So commuter parking came about primarily as a response to increasing car use. And as CBD areas became more dense and we had more high-rise buildings, more cars were being on the streets in the CBD environments. And in the 1970s and 80s, governments responded to this increasing congestion by building car parks out in suburban areas and then providing trains, buses, other modes of transport to get people into CBDs and to encourage people not to drive into the CBD. It was generally provided on a free basis and close to local railway stations. Now, obviously, this has a side disbenefit of alienating the land around the railway station from other uses and also potentially filling up parking that would be used within a town centre. So if you think about a railway system that was built in the 18 or 1900s where all the shops are around the train station, then if you put in commuter car parking, well, you need some land for that commuter car parking. So you get locals, both shopkeepers and residents who are dissatisfied with people using cars to get to the station and then taking up all the parking areas that's available, and also the loss of space that occurs when commuter car parks are built. They're seen as a cheap solution and politically popular because commuters get angry. They're like, I can't get to my train and you want me to use a train, so I have to park on the streets. And then the locals get angry because the locals can't actually park in front of their own house if they want that, or they can't park at the shops. So you end up with local governments increasing restrictions on parking, and then higher order governments in response building commuter car parks, which takes away land from other uses.
And do they work?
Yeah.
Do they get people onto public transport as opposed to driving?
They do, but not at the local level. So people drive to the station. So, and unfortunately, they increase dispersal. So rather than having compact towns around stations, you have suburban areas that grow and sprawl around the railway stations because it's easy to drive to the commuter car park. And, you know, there's Toronto, Dallas, places all over Australia and New Zealand, Japan has a lot of commuter car parks on their city outskirts. So people think, oh, Japan's this place where people don't drive and they all get the train. There's lots of car parks.
Yeah. So let's
let's
break it down into the fundamentals right here. This is there's as you said, the first thing is what's the alternative for people? Okay, so if the alternative is they're going to drive end to end into the city, which is already a very congested area. One of my questions is that because we're making the CBD too attractive for people to drive into? So if you're in London or Milan or Singapore, there are congestion charge zones, right? So people don't tend to drive into those areas because you have to pay. So one of the things here about commuter parking is you want to make public transport a more attractive option than driving all the way into the CBD, right? And one of the questions on my mind is it's very expensive to provide commuter parking, right? It's, you've got a whole bunch of land that you're using. Often it's multi-story these days as well. It becomes very expensive to build, maintain, etc. And it's free typically, right? So there's no revenue stream either. So don't you just end up in a situation where rather than making driving more difficult into the CBD by, for example, congestion charging or reducing the amount of parking in the CBD, this is kind of a tactical solution, an expensive solution to try and make driving less appealing for the CBD by making public transport more appealing by providing the free commuter car park.
So the congestion charging as a tactic to encourage people to use commuter parking, I think that's a fairly recent thing. But there's always been a societal cost of congestion in time, money, externalities in CBDs. So up until quite recently, there wasn't much done that made it harder to drive into CBDs. And I'm thinking primarily of places in the world where there has been that suburban sprawl.
Yeah.
So, you look at the UK and you think of, Birmingham, somewhere like that where, the city centre was destroyed and they built lots of motorways and lots of car parks and encouraged lots of driving in the 1950s and 1960s.
Bless them, yeah.
So, yeah. And the other parts of the world where the downtowns had such significantly increased density in a very short space of time, at the same time as the automobile was the symbol of freedom, that people wanted to be able to get from the new suburbs into the cities quickly. So we built lots of freeways, which dumped lots of people in the city. And then at some point, you have governments starting to realize that actually we're just going to have freeways and no actual city. And, living where we are in Sydney, there was a whole CBD freeway network that was planned in the 1970s and partially delivered in the 1980s, which would have meant that there was lots of freeways and much city left. So you can see where the government went, oh, okay, maybe we don't have the things the right way around. And they introduced a parking levy, which is a form of congestion charge, and started investing that money in improved public transport facilities, so infrastructure, not services, and also commuter car parks along the corridors. But we have commuter car parks in Sydney which are 4 kilometres away from the CBD.
Yes.
So it's not really a commuter, it's not really serving the people in those outskirt areas.
Yeah. So I think one of the things, and this is a really important thing, okay, is that with commuter car parks, you need to think carefully about the accessibility to the station. So if the station is the only station around for, 10 miles, and it's at the end of a line, okay, and the vast majority of the people that are going to be you're targeting live a long way from any station and any public transport option, commuter parking for me is a really good solution in that space. Is that fair?
It is fair because, well, you're making a trade-off of how do you get those people to the station. So you want them to use the train. You need to get them to the station. Now, 30% of people don't drive. So working age adults. I'm talking about, so our typical, commuters. I think it's 30. And
when you say don't drive to work, you mean?
Don't drive to work. Yeah, when they're traveling to work. So, and then you think about your typical density of a suburban area is about 15 dwellings per hectare. Don't know what that is per acre.
Low density.
And low density, yeah. So you can't expect the people who are on the peripheries to walk. Good number of them can't or won't ride a bicycle.
Yep.
And any bus service that you're going to provide is going to be highly subsidized, which is a choice.
Yep.
But also is you're going to have to provide lots of buses because you have to cover a large area.
Yeah, so it's going to be very inefficient other than outside around peak times, right? So when you balance all of that up, when you're talking about a station on the outskirts like that, there's a very strong case in my view for commuter parking. We'll talk about pricing later, but I think there's a strong case for a commuter parking solution and what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, and it's also a capital versus operation expenses trade-off. And we don't need to get into accounting standards, but government agencies and treasuries like spending capital rather than operations.
Yep. Buses require significant wages to be paid every year, right? Once you've built a commuter car park, the maintenance is small in comparison to the cost of the capital that you've had to pay out, right? So absolutely, it's, in terms of ongoing costs, it's cheaper. And it works. So it's a good solution for the outskirts. Now, one of the things here, though, is, as you say, increasingly as you get into the town centre, typically stations become much more closely, much closer together, typically. And the catchment that they're drawing from as a result is much smaller.
Yes. Yeah, and I did a couple of studies on this in Victoria for one of the local councils down there, where the then federal government had announced a program where they just decided they're going to give a whole bunch of money to this council to build 2 commuter car parks, only one of which would have actually provided any benefit to people who were commuting. But these town centres had other parking issues, which were resulting in the commuter car parks being filled up with primarily workers in the town centre.
Yes.
So, which comes to the whole issue of the commuter car parks being free.
Yes. Put a pin in that because we'll discuss that when I think we get to pricing later, because that's something that I worked on when I was in government as well. So the thing for me here is you've then got to be thinking about your target audience for that commuter car park, okay, as you get closer in. So you've got people who live, say, a 10-minute walk away, right, from the station, okay? Ideally, you don't want them driving to the commuter car park. You don't want them using limited amount of space when they're 10-minute walk away, do you?
No.
Okay.
Definitely.
And then you've got a group of people who are maybe 20 minutes away walking, but would be 10 minutes cycling, if there were good cycle paths. And that's a big if, and that's an issue we'll get onto, right? And then you've got a group of people who would be able to access the station very quickly if you had good public transport bus links into the station. You had a frequent service that was, long operating hours, and was, bus priority into the station. So your trip is quick, and regular and frequent and reliable. Then, you want those people using the buses to get into the station. Really, your target audience in an ideal world, and this is the idealized world, is the people that are beyond that, people who the public transport system is not going to provide them with a quick, in any way as possible, going to provide them with a quick trip into the station. It just becomes cost prohibitive because of the number of people you're going to be as you get further away from the station. They can't realistically cycle, although e-bikes is an interesting one, but we'll park that issue for a minute. Or walk, right? So those are the people you really want to do, because those are the ones where you really are, going to change their mode of choice for their trip into the city. Okay, if they can park. Whereas the other people, by providing the commuter parking, you're potentially inducing them to drive as opposed to use an alternative mode, which would be more desirable from a transport system perspective.
Yeah, and you want to capture people as far away from the CBD as possible. So you want to get them to the closest, most feasible steps. So to use an example, I live 60 kilometres outside Sydney. So I have a local railway station that has a train every hour, and that's right on that 20-minute walk.
Yeah.
It also has a small commuter car park. But if I drive 5 kilometers, then I have a local hub railway station, which during peak hours has a train every 20 minutes, which for regional areas is pretty good.
Yeah.
In New South Wales. And it has a lot more commuter parking. I can drive another 20 minutes beyond that and save 20 minutes travel time to the edge of the Sydney suburban network, where there's a lot more commuter parking. So the ideal world is I walk to the station for my local train, which is fine on the way to the city, but on the way home means you're tied in your leaving from your destination to get back home by when you can get to that local station. So then if I go to the hub station, which is in the middle of the town centre, then I'm fighting for limited commuter parking, which is free.
Yep.
Or parking on residential streets just outside the town centre, but it gives me a bit more choice. Or if I drive that extra 20 minutes, then I get even more transport choice because there's multiple rail routes through there, and there's a lot more commuter car parking. So which one do you think I would do?
That's a really good question. You're also somebody who takes into account the transport impacts. So you're not just doing it out of your own personal piece. You'd be looking at it from a transport perspective. So I'll go with the 20-minute one, the one that has a train every 20 minutes. No,
I drive to the one that has more trains. So the longer distance trip. So the parking is a little bit more remote from the major station, but there's a train every 5 minutes running. So because frequency is king.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So and that location has 3 commuter car parks, 2 of which are free. And also has a lot of unrestricted on-street parking as well. The third commuter car park is hypothetically paid. So if you use the train system,
Yeah.
or the bus system, you don't pay for the car park.
Yep.
Whereas if you just park there and work in the town centre, you do have to pay them. So,
Yep.
I'm guessing anyone who works in the town centre just takes the bus one stop in order to claim their free parking.
Yes. So this is probably where I should probably claim a sort of an interest, because when I was in the New South Wales government advising and we were looking at parking, and at that point, all commuter car parks were free for everybody. There was no charge, even if you were going onto the bus or the train. And then we implemented a system because we knew that there was a lot of people in a lot of commuter car parks who were just there to visit the local shops or local employment, and they weren't being used by commuters. So we started charging for those and giving it free to commuters, and that significantly reduced the demand for the commuter car parking, but freed up spaces for commuters. So it's better from a transport system perspective.
Yeah, though if you look at other places, they do actually charge for the commuter car parking. So there is a charge. It's not actually related to the public transport usage.
Yes. Now that's a really good question, right? So let's get on to the pricing discussion. Okay. So we talked earlier. So let me put the case for the freebie.
Yeah.
Okay. We want to get more people onto public transport. Okay. Let's make the commuter parking free. Okay. At least free if they use the public transport system. Okay. And therefore more people will use the commuter car park, and you will end up with more people using public transport, and that's got to be a good thing. So why would you not make it free?
Because you don't want to actually, so there's two components. One, you don't want to encourage driving. It's already hard enough, expensive enough to get into a CBD. And it isolates land use. So unless your car park's part of an integrated development. So, and then finally, are you actually getting anybody who wasn't going to drive and park anyway? So is it actually creating mode shift by having the commuter car park?
Yeah, so there's all those factors, right? So let's take each one, right? So going back to our people who are close to the station, who can walk, cycle, or take public transport, and let's work on the assumption, which is a really bad assumption, that there are good transport links into a station. Surprisingly, so many places are not good at putting good links into stations. But if there were good links, one of the ways of allowing people who live further away and don't have those good links into the station through public or active transport is to charge for the commuter parking. Because then people who can get to the station easily through walking or cycling or public transport are less likely to occupy the commuter car park, because they're going to value that much less. Whereas people who live further away will value the car park more, and so they will get access to it. So pricing does generate, not for everybody, but on the whole, it will encourage people who find it more difficult to access the station.
Yeah, but then when you price something, you need to improve the quality of it and the features of it. So I think about different type of commuter car parking or commuter parking, but Japan has lots of paid bicycle parking around railway stations.
Yep.
And often there's some form of attendant there, or the security is quite high. Or also Japan has a very law compliant society, though they do have lots of bicycle thefts. But you're less likely to have your bike damaged in general.
Yes. Although I noticed that London, I think, has just decriminalised stealing people's bikes from outside public transport.
Well, decriminalised or deprioritised?
Wow. deprioritized, I think, is the official way of describing it. Right, but it's accepting the fact that they're not going to spend any time on it. It's free reign really for people. But I mean, it goes back to you need secure bicycle parking as a separate issue. But let's keep on commuter car parking.
Yeah.
Right, although bike parking is at stations is a commuter parking.
Yes.
But in terms of the
so what's the evidence for that paid parking works?
That's a really great question. So one is, I think when I looked at the evidence base around commuter parking, it's not fabulous. It's not a very rich researched area. And a lot of the studies are limited in that there's almost an assumption that if somebody has used the commuter car park, their alternative would have been to drive. So it kind of like over exaggerates the mode share shift. So you kind of need to discount it because you don't know what people would have done as an alternative, like walk to the station rather than drive. So you've got that sort of challenge. In terms of the pricing, it's scant. So what's interesting is San Francisco, so their BART system has commuter parking. They effectively went to use Donald Shoup's methods of pricing for parking. So effectively dynamically changing the pricing every few months on the basis of keeping the commuter car park 85% full. So that anybody that always wanted to use the commuter car park would always have access to a space, but it would always be charged. And what they found was it was very good at getting people to share cars to the station. So people pick up their neighbors and take them to the station, which was great because it meant obviously less, it's half the number of car trips into the station. And a lot more people walked or cycled or took public transport to those stations as well. So it's a very good way of pricing it. And of course, the people that are using the parking then are disproportionately people who find it much more difficult to get to access the station from by other means. So you're getting those things. So that's the experience that you get in San Francisco. Now, I appreciate not the whole world is not like San Francisco, but I haven't seen a lot of other evidence beyond that in community parking. I don't know if you've seen anything in particular.
No, I know Perth charges a like daily fee for some of their car parks, and again, going back to Japan, there is only private car parking in Japan. There's no government run free car parks. And then you've also got places like Oxford and Cambridge where you have the paid commuter car parks on the edge of on the outskirts of the city. And it's Oxford that has the shuttle buses that run from the car parks.
Yeah, quite a few places got park and ride in the UK. Oxford, I think, is one. Swindon's another one. They're just sort of like to get people onto public transport from the outer suburbs, as you say, and villages around the city centre.
Yeah. So it's a challenge, and then when we get into the land use of commuter car parking, it's very hard to do an integrated development with a commuter car park. I've done multiple projects where there's always been a desire for adaptive reuse of the car park at some point in the future, and often I do think to myself, politically, you're not going to be able to get rid of this thing once it's in place. So why are you caring about the fact that it could be turned into a shop in the future?
So let's pick up that point now, okay? Because we're in a world where autonomous vehicles are being rolled out around the world. And the thing about autonomous vehicles is they don't need to park at commuter car parks. They can take you from your home to the station, and if it's a robo-taxi, they can go and pick someone else up. If it's your own car, they'll just head back to your house and go and park outside your home. waiting to pick you up on the way back from the station. So they don't need to park at the commuter car park anymore. Right.
Well,
so
not
is
necessarily.
okay.
So yeah, you look at, okay, so the case we're talking a lot about San Francisco. So the robo taxis are taking up car parks because once you create an ability to order the robo taxis in a very short space of time, then they have to be close by.
So that's for robo taxis.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big things we don't know about autonomous vehicles is, are we going to end up with a ubiquitous robo taxi model, or are we going to end up with a significant proportion of people still owning a car? It just happens to now be an autonomous car as opposed to a self-driving car. So that's the Tesla. The Tesla model is a bit of a hybrid. They want to do some robo taxis, but they want you to own your vehicle and it will drive you to wherever you want to go itself. And then the idea for them, I think, is that they want to be able to lease it out. Now, I have issues with whether Tesla will ever be safe enough to be a ubiquitous autonomous vehicle driving, autonomous vehicle piece. But let's park that issue. But potentially we could see private vehicles being being autonomous. In those scenarios, you're not going to park in a commuter car park, are you?
It depends, because you're so okay, well, we're never going to have fully autonomous cars that can go anywhere, do anything.
Level 5, right?
Yeah,
they're more likely to be level 4. They'll go around your local area.
Yeah. Urban environments, primarily motorways. Yeah. So, the idea that I hop in my car, it takes me down to the railway station, it comes home, it does some trips, taking my children to and from various activities, and then it comes back and picks me up in the evening. That's I suppose, the urbanist nightmare world, where you have, and then economically, where you have lots of kilometers with 0 passengers because the vehicle's driving around with nobody.
Yeah.
That's I suppose, a hypothetical possibility. But if we're 30 years away from that, and we're still building 1,000 lots, multi-deck commuter car parks next to railway stations, then what do we do with those spaces? Will they turn over?
Yeah,
and the robo taxi industry doesn't want you to go to the railway station.
No,
they want you not to get out of the vehicle.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into how we incentivize autonomous vehicles appropriately to get the most for our transport system. We'll park that for another day. But surely there's a kind of a piece here where what we're looking to do is get the commuter car parks to be used efficiently, with thinking about autonomous vehicles. Now, if you're going to end up in a situation where you have, say, a transit-oriented development, so lots of places are looking at transit-oriented development, and one of the things here I have beefs here is, if you take a multi-story commuter car park, or even a single-story commuter car park, right, that can be used for a whole bunch of amenity and housing as an alternative. And the thing is, all of those people that are going to be in those apartments, right, are going to have fantastic access to public transport because they are right next to the station. Now, if the alternative for them is that you're going to build that housing significantly further away from the station because that band's no longer available, then you've just generated a whole load of extra car trips, in effect.
Yeah. So it comes down to where you place the commuter car park. So we
Good point.
place commuter car parks next to railway stations because the railway operator or the government generally owns the land.
Yeah.
So it's cheap. So
Sorry,
if
it's not cheap. They've already purchased it.
yes,
Okay,
there's
and they're not.
there's
And then
no new capital cost.
there's no
on that
new
land.
capital. They've already paid the capital, and often very expensively so.
Yeah.
Right, and they've often had no return on that land for many, many years. But yes, go on. Sorry.
So and having worked in planning commuter car parks, when you say, well, we should put the commuter car park on the edge of the town centre, because that then supports the town centre, because people have to walk through the town centre to get to the railway station. Then you get the response of, oh, well, what about late at night when somebody's walking from the railway station to the isolated commuter car park? And you get into this lose-lose argument of you're dealing with the safety of hypothetical people and it's like, oh, well, nothing's going to be happening in the town centre late at night. And it's like, well, yes, but nothing's happening in the commuter car park that you would replace the town centre with late at night.
Yes.
So there's a lot of issues with where we place commuter car parks because we're thinking about the convenience of the driver, not the potential of the land use.
Yeah.
And not the potential of that distance between the car park and the station.
Yes, which is also a factor, right? Because if you make the commuter car park further away, setting aside the safety issues, you've added to travel time, right? You've made it less convenient.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
which
potentially it's got some health benefits. You're going to get an extra 2,000 steps in, an extra 1,000 steps there, an extra 1,000 steps back. The health service will be happy. But yeah.
Yeah, and the way people treat their value of travel time is that time in walking between that edge commuter car park and the railway station costs, in inverted commas, them more than the time of if they parked in a CBD car park and had to walk to the lift, wait for the lift, get out of the lift, and then walk to their destination. Because of the mentality of how we treat transfers between modes.
Yes, we don't treat them as equal psychologically.
Yeah, so you have to if you replace that with high frequency services, then people are willing to actually have that edge parking, and you only have to look at locations where there's high frequency services that are serving a large area. You will have people who will park a kilometre away from a railway station, and then walk to the station because it gets them to their destination, and they don't have to find parking. They don't get stuck in massive congestion along the way or within the CBD. But then if you said, actually, we're going to build a commuter car park at 500 metres away, and you will save 500 metres walk distance, they will say, well, why aren't you building it right next to the station?
Yes, agreed.
Even though we're saving them 5 minutes walking time.
Yes. Now, the other challenge I have, and this goes back to the free parking, is you provide a whole bunch of free commuter parking, and it fills up very quickly. Right? It's free. And then you get the people who go, see, you didn't provide enough parking around for the station. You now need to build another car park.
Yes.
Okay. So one of my which is often then tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of additional cost. when actually, if you were pricing the commuter parking properly, you would have a lot less demand for the commuter parking without compromising on your modal shift goals. And then you wouldn't have the extra demand for the additional commuter parking as well. So one of the things here is not just, it's not a question of commuter parking good or bad, right? You want to get the right amount of commuter parking and in the right locations. And one of the things I think we do badly is we often end up with too much commuter parking in the wrong places.
Yeah, and when I say historically, I'm talking about last 20, 30 years worth of transport planning practice has been to focus on the amount of parking rather than the why of parking.
Yep, good point.
So you do a commuter car parking study and you look at the natural catchment of the station. And you go, okay, well, how many people here who live in this catchment are using car plus train as their mode? And okay, well, we assume they all want to park at their local station, and we work out how many cars that is. This is at the most base. And then if you're doing a car park like that one that I often choose to drive to because of the service frequency, you may go, okay, well, let's do an intercept survey of people entering the station and find out where they've come from.
Yeah.
And then maybe you increase the number a bit more because you're doing a commuter car park for that station.
Yes, not for the system.
You're not doing it for the system.
Yes.
So, whereas now we use GPS data. So you isolate the station, you pull from one of the many data providers, you pull down all the home locations of the phones that are going through the stations. And if that was where they were, however many minutes before they went to the station, that their home is away. But we're still only looking at the station. So ministers announced we're going to build a new commuter car park for this station. I get a project which is work out how many spaces, how big should this car park be? Go back to the minister or to the bureaucrats. Very unlikely to ever be dealing with a minister on one of these types of projects. Yep. And you say, well, actually, your problem's all these people from my actual part of the world who are driving because their local train service is crap.
Yes.
Give them an improved train service and you don't need this commuter car park.
Yes.
You're a political advisor. Does that ever make it to the minister?
So I think one of the challenges here, first of all, I think generally my view is transport is very poor at defining what the problem is and then providing alternative solutions and looking and evaluating different solutions. So that's the problem here. Often it's the commuter car park is full. The problem is the commuter car park is full. Therefore, the solution is more parking space. Okay. Now, even if I have a significant problem with the problem statement of the commuter car park is full, okay, because that's not what you're trying to solve. The solution here is, we're not trying to make the system better by having more commuter parking. That's not kind of the aim of the system. So there's a problem with the problem definition. Even if you accept that problem definition, it should still go, well, actually, we find that, 80% of the people in the commuter car park are living within 10 minutes walk away, right? Therefore, the other option is for us to price this differently and provide a different, differentiated system so that you are able to, you offer guaranteed spaces for people at a price and those sorts of things in order to provide a better offering, etc. Right? So that people that can access the station without driving will do, and you free up a whole load of spaces for people who can't. Okay? Those sorts of options never come forward. So that's the second problem. The third problem is commuter car parks are like roads. At election time, politicians love pledging new roads and new commuter car parks. They are very popular politically, and so they're not considered from a transport system perspective. They're just done from a what is popular perspective. And if you have a congested road or a commuter car park that is always full, by 6:30 in the morning, okay, for a local politician to say, I'm going to promise a new commuter car park is easy for them and easy vote gathering. Okay, it's a bad solution from a transport system perspective, but it is easy vote harvesting. And that's one of the big problems why we over provision commuter car parks. Now my personal view is if we move to a system of pricing commuter parking, the number of commuter car parks we'd have which are full would significantly drop, and so the demand for additional commuter parking would significantly drop. If you then put the revenues from those commuter car parks into improving links into stations, public transport and active transport, so that you've got regular bus services, you've got good cycling infrastructure, etc., then you significantly reduce the demand for commuter car parks. You've significantly improved your bike infrastructure and your public transport system. That's a much better system outcome than building another commuter car park.
Yeah, and the interesting side thing is from someone who's worked in the engineering consulting industry. If a transport plan is part of an engineering project team, and so engineering firms won the detailed design of this commuter car park. Transport planner says, you're addressing the wrong issue.
You'll get ignored.
Very unlikely to make it to the point because there's no longer a detailed design that's required.
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, though, by then you've already assumed that the thing is being built. So it's too late down the process, right? So it's not the transport planner's fault or even the consultant's fault, right? It should have been dealt with right up front at the strategic business case level going, is this the right thing to do? Right? Are there better options? Right? And to be honest with you, you need, and this is one thing I would say on most transport most jurisdictions do not have, is a comprehensive parking policy, including commuter parking. They're not thinking strategically about how they're using parking to benefit the overall transport system. A lot of it's very piecemeal.
And then commuter car parks are dressed up as accessibility. So we're going to improve access to the transport system by spending $40,000 to $100,000 per space on improving people's ability to drive.
Absolutely. So let me give you an example. So when I was in the government, and we'd started very sensibly, and absolutely the right thing to do, doing customer surveys quarterly to understand what they thought about our public transport system and the different modes, etc., and their satisfaction. And one of the questions there was, how easy is it to park at your local station? And
it's incredibly hard.
Right. And so it was like, and so satisfaction on that was, most of our scores were above 90%. And with that question, it was the outlier. It was like 65%. Okay. And so it was, we need more commuter parking. That was the answer. So I changed the question. And I said to them, let's ask a more broad question. How easy is it for you to access your station? Okay. Because lots of people don't drive to their station. They walk or they cycle to their station. And the answer came back, it was basically, we ended up with like 94% of people said it was easy to access their station. So it completely transformed the issue and the challenge that we had in terms of, removing that incentive for the answer is commuter parking.
And that falls in line with a modal access hierarchy for a station where, you're supposed to prioritize walking, access for all, then cycling, public transport access, primarily buses, shared vehicles, then private vehicles as your last access mode. But too often that last access mode gets the majority of available land, being the commuter car park.
Okay, so Graham,
Mm.
I'm someone who's sitting at the top of a transport agency, and I'm like, I've got loads of commuter car parks. I've got loads of them are full. What should I do? What should I do, Graham? You're a consultant. You know, you've done lots of stuff in commuter parking. What's the first thing you'd be advising the person in charge of this thing to do?
Well, it literally goes back to what you were just saying. What's your problem definition statement?
Yeah.
What is commuter car parking trying to solve?
Yeah.
So, and that usually takes that probably takes more time than studying the commuter car parking because of all the different interest groups. Because people who walk to stations, they just lump it. They might say have issues with safety that they raise. So, cross road environments, nighttime safety, visibility, those type of things. But they're not as whingy or as noisy as people who drive.
No.
I don't know if, yeah.
But our expectations, one of the things I think, and that's a really interesting point, is that our expectations for the walking infrastructure is different to our expectations for car infrastructure. So we kind of almost have a low standard for what we expect in a walking environment in many places. Whereas there seems to be a very, right? They don't complain about it in the same way. Why are they not so vociferous? Because I think it's kind of like, right? It's like it is what it is. Whereas if you don't have the car infrastructure, people seem to feel that they have a right to better car infrastructure, but they don't seem to feel they have the right to better walking infrastructure.
But and they also expect not to have to pay for the car infrastructure. Yeah.
So I agree with your problem statement and the need to actually work it, herd all the cats and agree what it is you're trying to do with your parking system, right? And I think that where you would end up, right, is moving aside the political challenges, and that's a different ball game altogether, right? Is commuter parking would not be free. You would have a charge for it. You would significantly improve connections to stations on using public and active transport as much as you could. So priority bus lanes, frequent services, wide periods of time for coverage. So if you got home at 7 o'clock, there's no, you don't want to be in a situation where there's a bus service because you've had to work late that night, etc. Right? Because that's no good at all, etc. Those are the key things. Is there anything else?
Well, it's not just about the particular station itself. It's about why are people using this station?
Yeah.
So are you actually addressing the transport needs of the community, or are you responding to a problem? So the alternatives analysis of actually understanding why people are using the station. So suburban rail link in Melbourne. So, new circumferential railway line that's being built up will be completely underground, and they are redoing building new town centres around each of these new stations. There will be no commuter car parking as part of this project, but because the objective is that the street network and land use will prioritise non-car usage. There'll be areas for drop-off, but there will be no commuter car parking at any of these new stations.
Yeah.
You compare that with other new lines in the Anglosphere in suburban areas, and you would probably be hard-pressed to find one that doesn't have new commuter car parking associated with it.
Now, Which is, I think you raise an interesting point, which is you need to think much more broadly than the commuter car park itself. Because if people are going into the CBD, the question is, how would you prefer them to go into the CBD? Right? And one of the things you have to understand there is, what are the incentives that are driving them to use the car in the CBD? So if you're making it very easy to drive into the CBD, it's free, it's easy, and the parking is cheap or free in the CBD, it doesn't matter how much commuter parking you're going to provide, people won't bother using public transport because you're providing a very compelling car offering for them. Now, I appreciate, right, there's very few CBDs in that space because most of them end up very congested as a result, and parking is increasingly scarce.
Yeah, though you looking at the Australian context, there's a lot of early bird parking in the CBD, so that arrive before 9, leave after 5, which it has always frustrated me because that's peak commuting hours, and like, how is that early bird? So you look at Melbourne or Perth, parts of Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide. There's a lot of people driving into the CBD areas and parking there. So the price signal and the public transport provision isn't at a level where a reasonable number of people are still driving into those locations. So we still haven't disincentivized driving into the CBDs enough to take out that last 10% of commuters.
Yes. And so that's part of this calculation, right? For me, it's not just about how easy you're making it to access public transport. It's how difficult are you making the alternative in a way.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that's politically challenging, but it's still an important aspect of thinking about this from a system-wide perspective.
So, Russell, when we're dealing with the politics, we briefly touched on that car drivers are whingers. How does a courageous politician move the dial to treating commuter car parks as part of the system that discourages driving overall?
The biggest hurdle that you've got to get over is, how do you start pricing for commuter parking when it's been free? And it's always very difficult to undo stuff that's free, which is why we don't have widespread congestion charging, for example. When people think of something as free, it becomes very difficult to undo. So the question for me is, how would you go about doing that when you need to do it, and how else have other places do it? So the thing I would say is, you have to do it as part of a package. So if you're going to start charging at a commuter car park, you can't think of just the commuter car park itself. You've got to think about all the links to the station as well. So if you're going to do it properly. Make sure that you're upgrading all of the active transport links, so it's easy to walk and cycle for people to access the station. Make sure you've got good bus services coming in and out of that station so you can easily take alternatives. And then you can start saying to people, and then change the offering. You talked about this earlier on the parking. So provide people with a guaranteed parking space, so they don't have to get up at 4:30 in the morning in order to get a space in the commuter car park. I think when you do those things, then you're offering a better offering, and you can go from free to something that's charged. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of money, but it's enough to discriminate. The other thing you need to do is, you also need to stop the spillover. So you need to make sure that the local streets have got appropriate parking restrictions on them as well. Okay, so that local residents are not discriminated, are comfortable with the parking arrangements as well. If you do all of those things together as a package, I think you can do it. Okay, but you need to think about it as a package, not just as we're going to implement pricing in this commuter car park. Because I think then you can argue why it will be better for people that need to access the commuter car park, and for people that are closer by, they've got easier access than they have today in order to be able to access the station. So you can make the argument about why it's a better system. I actually think you'll end up with more people as well shifting onto the public transport system if you do that, because I think people who currently can't access the station at a reasonable time in the morning for whatever reason and can't get into the commuter car park are probably driving to their destination instead, because the commuter car park is full. So I think you'd end up with a much better outcome in terms of the overall system. And I think you can get the data to prove that, but you've got to do it as it's a kind of sticks and carrots kind of combination.
So one of the things you just said then, counterintuitively in Sydney, government has a policy that if they build a commuter car park, the local council is not allowed to then increase restrictions on the remaining streets. So the amount of on-road supply has to remain the same even when a commuter car park's built. That sounds a bit counter, the exact opposite of what you were just saying.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing about, our policies need to be holistic about the transport system. Okay. Not trying to, make sure that we don't end up with, we need to make sure we have good outcomes across the system, not have a situation where you're saying, oh, well, we're going to start charging now you're going to have spillovers, but it's tough. Okay. Because then now you're going to end up with a local backlash. So you need to deal with all of those sorts of challenges. But it goes back to your point about understanding what is the problem here that you're trying to do, and what are the levers you need to pull to change the system to deliver better outcomes. Okay. And one of the things you have to do is you have to change how you're going to deal with parking, and local councils. I think once you understand the holistic problem and you look at your options around how to deal with it, all of these things become automatic and go, well, we're going to need to change the regulations in order to deal with these things. Okay. So get your policy right. Okay. And work out how to implement the policy successfully. And I think but the challenge has got to be, someone needs to articulate the problem to ministers. Best will in the world, most ministers will not get this, right? And won't understand commuter parking. They're not transport experts, and we don't expect them to be. Okay. Similarly, most of their advisors are political advisors. They are not transport advisors with a political lens as well. Okay. So they won't understand the issue as well. So you've got to be proactive as a transport agency in saying, commuter parking, okay, we can do this better. Okay. Explain the problem to the minister and their advisors, okay, and come up with workable solutions for them that can work politically. Now, one of the reasons for doing this right now is most transport agencies around the world are feeling the pinch, right? Government budgets are stretched for all sorts of reasons. Many transport agencies are struggling for money because of COVID. They haven't got, patronage hasn't returned, etc. Okay, this is a much more cost-effective way of running a better transport system by getting commuter parking sorted. So you're not outlaying vast sums of money for more commuter parking, and you're starting to get revenue streams in for the commuter parking you've already got.
So how does the minister then sell it politically? So, I can, going back to the 1980s, that's a very courageous decision, minister.
My personal view is, having got rid of things like free fares as well, is you've got to explain the problem to people. Okay, you've got to explain to them that the reason commuter parking is full is because it's free. That's why it's full, right? And so if you put even just a token charge on it, people who live close by, and you'll be able to get this from the data. You said that the GPS data is, you can go, we've got X percentage of people who live within a very short distance from the station who are driving into the commuter car park. Okay, let's provide better alternatives for those people. And then these people don't need to use the commuter car park, and that will free it up for people who need to be able to drive. That means we'll end up with more people using the station rather than less. It delivers a better outcome. It reduces congestion. So it's a much better outcome. And it doesn't need to be, you don't have to make a big deal of it. I think it's really about just explaining the problem and talking to people. So the thing I would say is talk about the problem and explain it to the community first before you even announce a change. For months, explain the problem that it's dealing with. Get the data from the, the public servants and the consultants, etc., and go, our commuter car parks, whatever the percentage is, and it'll be quite large, is being used by people who live close by. We need to get those people stop them driving to the commuter car parks and get them into public and active transport. That will deliver much better outcomes and use of our commuter car parks. I think if you explain that problem to people extensively and you put it into lots and lots of speeches, when you come out with a solution, which provides a whole bunch of incentives for people who live close by to stop using the commuter car parking and access the station in other ways, I think people will better understand why you're doing it. Okay.
Yeah.
If you then pledge that the money coming in goes back into paying for the public transport in the local area to improve access to the station, people will see that the money is being used in a fair way as well. If it just goes back into central coffers and then people go, well, it's just a money grab, I think you'll lose it politically. But if you're saying this is helping us to pay for the improved bus services that we've put in the local area, then I think it becomes much more politically defendable as well.
Yeah, and that one of the two locations that I did the parking study in Melbourne, I said to the local council, you have an access problem, not a parking problem, in that you have too many people who are coming to this town centre who live very close by.
By car.
By car, yeah. People who can walk and cycle because you've provided an abundance of car parking.
Yeah.
So their entire main street had car parking behind it on both sides, and then there was a railway station commuter car park. Now, the car parking that the council had controlled, they had put time restrictions on in order to encourage turnover and not use as commuter car parking. So all the workers, many of whom live close by, were then parking in the commuter car park, filling it up so it seemed to be full with commuters.
Yeah.
When it was actually full with workers in the town centre.
Yeah, which is a very, very common thing when you make parking free.
And you have different people responsible for the control of different parking areas.
Yes. Hence why you need a proper parking strategy.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point to leave it. So thank you, everybody, for listening, watching, subscribe, buy us a coffee on YouTube or Patreon, and we will catch you next week.
Thanks, Graham. Great to talk to you. Bye, everyone.